Welcome back to Questions for the Rector. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, is the Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary here in Reading, Pennsylvania, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
Today, we're going to be getting a question that might be a bit technical and might be unknown, but some lay people would do well to know. And the question is, what is a simplex priest?
The simplex priest is a priest who is ordained simply to say Mass and only that. Therefore, it would exclude preaching and hearing confessions.
Why did such a type of priest exist in the church?
Well, sometimes the church needed priests to say Mass, period. And missionary countries or where there's an acute need. And you understand in the Eastern rites, not in this country, but in the Eastern countries, that there are some priests that are ordained only for that, and then the archimandrite is the one that preaches. And many priests are forbidden to preach, that they just say Mass. You see, so I understand that to be true. I've never, but I've been told that. So that would be the reason for it. If there's some acute need for Mass and not an acute need for preaching or hearing confessions.
It might be not entirely obvious to lay people, Your Excellency. Why is it more difficult to be able to preach or hear confessions than to say Mass? When I say more difficult, that it would require more studies or...
Well, to hear confessions requires a deep knowledge of moral theology. And to a certain extent canon law, but the deep knowledge of moral theology, and that takes years. I mean, we have 4 years of moral theology here, and they have to devour a big 3 volumes of perhaps 1,000 pages each in Latin. So it's formidable, so. If you don't have that knowledge, you should not be hearing confessions, only in an emergency if somebody's dying.
I suppose, can I get a bit pedantic, Your Excellency, and what is that knowledge and why is it important? Because some might say, well, you're just listening to sins, confess to our Lord, you're serving as an instrument. Why do you need to have 3,000 pages minimum worth of knowledge?
Well, you have to know, of course, the moral law, and you have to be able to understand whether they have committed a mortal sin or a venial sin. So you have to know all of the rules of consent and what increases guilt, what decreases guilt, all of those things, and many, many other aspects of both the moral law and the church's law. It's a science, and when you're in the confessional, you call upon all of those things. Questions of justice. For example, one of the toughest things in the confessional is if someone confesses having cheated an insurance company. And so, you have to look into the contract. What is the contract? They're not sure if they receive the funds correctly, or if they receive too much or...
But how, I suppose, just practically, how would you resolve that in the confessional, Your Excellency? They're probably not going to have a copy of the contract. You're not going to be at
Well, they might have to come back.
Okay.
Yes. That's questions of justice are usually the most sticky as far as figuring them out. Because, who owes what to whom. Sometimes marriage questions and obligations of spouses, things like that. It's very, very broad. It's as broad as human activity. So, what people can do and obligations of children to parents, parents to children, sometimes it gets very complicated. And sometimes you have to ask people to come back because you have to look things up. That's rare, but sometimes you do.
So even with all of the study and even with however many years of experience someone might have, you might still need to look things up because situations come up.
Yes, well, part of the training is where to look. You see, you would know right away, oh, that's here, that's you. But if you don't have the training, you don't even know where to look.
And hence why you shouldn't be hearing confessions.
Right. As a lawyer might, you see lawyers' offices, they have all these tomes, and they have their internet,
Or the pre-Nicene
yeah,
fathers,
yes.
ante-Nicene fathers.
They know, they have a sense of the law. They know where to look. That's the same thing. In other words, you get a feel for how to resolve the problem, or you can ask other priests too.
Well, I think what you just explained, Your Excellency, it underscores what I've heard you say in either sermons or conferences before, which is a lot of times lay people don't come well prepared to confession. Hence, basically, a priest has to do the preparation and then help them do the confession correctly, because they come in there saying, I was angry at my spouse, and that's all, Father. And that doesn't
No,
mean
worse
anything.
than that, they say, I've been bad.
Adults say this?
Oh, you usually get a mess when you're in the confessional. It's you get all sorts of extraneous material at times, and then you get insufficient material. How
Yeah.
many times? Well, I'm not sure, and well, take a good guess. And how many times a week? And well, I don't know. There's all sorts of the best confessions are those of priests, because they know how to confess.
Right.
So those go, they take about 2 or 3 minutes, and then they're done. You see, because they know not to.
Again, they've been properly
Right.
trained. You mentioned extraneous. That's always my favorite one when this is mentioned by clergy, that you confess the sins of your spouse potentially. Like,
Yes.
oh well, I said this to my spouse, but he was really mean to me last week. And
Oh,
this
worse
is-
than that. I mean, he's just a horrible man, or something like that, and that he irritates me, and this is why I get upset.
So priests receive training in moral theology, not only in order to be properly trained to receive confessions, but in order to help improperly trained lay people to make their confessions.
Yes, you have to clean up their confession, in the sense that you have to make it presentable so that you can absolve them correctly, give them the proper advice, give them the proper penance. See, it's also a place in which a great deal of conversion of the sinner is done. See, so it's a spiritual lesson for the penitent. You see, so you have to know ascetical and mystical theology as well, especially if you're hearing the confessions of people who are somewhat advanced in the spiritual life. In other words, for example, the confessions of seminarians, you see, who are advancing in the spiritual life. You're going to go much deeper into their spiritual lives than you would, say, in a parish situation, because they have to develop these virtues and they have to overcome certain vices, and that's where you see what the problems are. You see, so you call upon ascetical and mystical theology as well, and they get courses in that here too. They get courses in everything here.
So do you see a place for simplex priests in today's situation for the church?
Well, I could see an acute need in certain cases, just if we look at it from that point of view. But I also see a big danger, and that is that there would be the temptation, and I have seen this happen, to decide, well, I'm going to be an ordinary priest, and I will hear confessions, I will have my own apostolate. They leave your organization and they go off on their own and do this and present themselves to the people as someone ordained by me. That has never happened with me, but or as Bishop so and so, a Bishop so that I've been ordained by. So that puts a stamp of approval on him. You see, why would Bishop so and so ordain him if he were not really ready? See, so and they don't explain that he was ordained as a simplex, or what we say ad
And
misam.
you know of at least one case where this has happened, where someone was ordained
At least one case, yes.
ad misam being synonymous with simplex.
Yes. Ad misam means for mass only.
So in that case, what should lay people do when meeting a priest they don't know, who's unconnected to a known organization like the Roman Catholic Institute or the Institute of Our Mother of Good Counsel? What should they do?
The first thing is to ask for an ordination certificate. The next thing is, where were you trained, and for how long were you trained, and did you graduate, in the sense that somebody can say, well, I I studied at Most Holy Trinity Seminary. Well, he may have been dismissed after 3 months. You see, did you graduate, and were you approved for ordination by the rector of the seminary, etc.? These are perfectly legitimate questions, particularly in these times, because the bishop of the diocese in regular times would assure all of that. And if he were sent to a parish and from the bishop, you would assume that all of that is true, you see. But now it's very fluid, and there are many priests who are improperly trained that are floating around and looking for jobs, and they can do a lot of damage.
Well, when I've shared this advice before that you can ask about an ordination certificate and ask about where someone was trained, an understandable response from some of the laity is, well, isn't that rude to ask Father? I need to be respectful of clergy. Isn't it rude to demand these questions from him?
Not at all. And if there is the slightest hesitation about giving you that information, that is a sure sign that you should have nothing to do with that clergyman.
Red flag.
Yes.
I suppose another red flag, which is a more informal one, Your Excellency, is if you ask other clergy about this father and they've never heard of him before.
That's if the traditional movement is so small that, particularly in your own country, if you have not heard of some individual who claiming to be a priest in your own sphere, your own country or region, that is almost a sure sign that there's something wrong, because we know pretty much everybody, at least what their fundamental credentials are.
Do you see Simplex as usually the first step for someone who's been conditionally ordained, someone who's come from the Novus Ordo and they found somehow a conditional ordination from a traditional bishop, that this is the safest path for them to pursue until they can potentially secure more training?
It's possible, but again, I would be very, very careful in that case. It would be a lot of circumstances that would contribute to it. But if I ever did that, I would have to be sure that the person was of very, very high character and that he would persevere in his studies. And I would make him sign in front of witnesses that he would not go off and become let's call it an ordinary priest with an ordinary apostolate until such time as he was approved to do so by me or the Roman Catholic Institute.
And why such precaution, Your Excellency?
Because you have to be trained properly in order to function as a normal priest. And again, normal, that means having, let's say, a full service priest, let's call it that. A full service priest, they have to all be trained correctly. Why do we have this seminary here? Why do we kill ourselves every day? Why do the seminarians kill themselves every day? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of drudgery, you might say. It's classes and exams, etc. Why do we do this except to produce for the people priests who are properly trained? And Pius XI insisted on that training. But there's a temptation today to say all we need is the Mass, and that's very dangerous.
Would you say, following that line of thought, that it's better to have no priest than to have a improperly trained one?
Yes, I would say that.
And why is that?
Because an improperly trained one could lead you astray. You can go to heaven without the Mass, but you can't go to heaven without the faith. See, so even if you were to see Mass seldom, it would be better to do that than to take a priest about whom you have doubts concerning his training. And he might lead you astray without even wanting to, or just because he doesn't know how to be a priest.
I was going to say, if we give him the most generous interpretation, he doesn't even know what he doesn't know.
Right. That's even worse.
Right. So he may not mean to lead you astray, or as you've said before, only 2 or 3 heresies allowed when you're a deacon. But since he was never properly trained, he was never called out on those heresies, and then those heresies continue, and no one else is going to call
It'd be like going to a doctor who has no training.
Or never took his boards.
Right, never took his boards, or, took a year of medical school or something like that. Would you do that? I mean, only if you were desperate, but... No, it's in violation of all of the norms of the Catholic Church.
Well, on that note, listeners, watchers, if you'd like to contribute to the formation of properly trained clergy, you can subscribe, share this video with other people who might be concerned about such issues. Please feel free to send a super thanks, or if you'll look in the description below, there's a chance to go to our donate page where we accept contributions in many different forms. As always, Your Excellency, thank you.
Could I add one thing?
Oh, yes.
The also untrained priests, the habit of ordaining untrained priests or improperly trained priests, insufficiently trained priests, leads to invalidity of the sacraments. This is what happened with what we call the Old Catholics. They started out with valid orders from some Catholic bishop someplace, and then because they were ordaining people like who were plumbers during the day or postal workers during the day, and at night they would be functioning as priests without any training, they don't know how to do the sacraments. They don't know what a valid sacrament is or is not. See, they just they have ignorance about all of those things, and that's one of the bad side effects of that.
Worst case scenario.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that helpful PS to our episode, Your Excellency, and as always, thank you for your time.
Thank you.